There are some stories that stay with you, ones you can never quite shake no matter how hard you try. This is one of those stories, and it happened to me when I was just a teenager. It was late autumn, the air crisp and cold as the days grew shorter and the night stretched on. My friends and I, a group of thrill-seeking high schoolers, had decided to do something spooky for Halloween. We were bored of the usual haunted houses and horror movies, so someone, probably Sam, our self-proclaimed daredevil, suggested we spend the night in the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. "Come on, it'll be fun," Sam had said, grinning mischievously. What's scarier than a cemetery at night? It was a small town, and the cemetery was one of the oldest places around. Generations of families were buried there, their graves marked by weathered headstones and crumbling monuments. The place had a reputation for being haunted, but no one really believed in ghosts. Not really, so we agreed. It was supposed to be a bit of harmless fun, just a way to get our adrenaline pumping. We packed flashlights and blankets, then headed out after dark. By the time we arrived, the cemetery was shrouded in fog, the mist swirling around the gravestones like something out of a horror movie. The tall, wrought iron gate creaked as we pushed it open, and I swear for just a moment I thought I heard a whisper in the wind. I brushed it off as nerves and followed my friends inside. We found a spot near an old oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like twisted arms. We spread out the blankets and settled in, our flashlights casting long, eerie shadows across the gravestones. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but we tried to laugh it off, making jokes and telling ghost stories to keep our minds from wandering. As the night wore on, the temperature dropped and the fog grew denser, obscuring everything beyond our little circle of light. The cemetery was dead silent, no pun intended, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. It was easy to forget that we were surrounded by the dead, at least for a while. Then, just after midnight, things started to change. It began with a strange sound, like soft footsteps on the gravel path. We all heard it, and our laughter died in our throats as we looked around, trying to pinpoint the source. But there was no one there. Nothing but the graves and the fog. "Did you guys hear that?" Emily asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Probably just an animal," I said, though I didn't believe it. The sound had been too deliberate, too human. Sam, of course, wasn't fazed. "Maybe it's just the ghosts coming out to say hello," he said with a grin, but even he seemed a little uneasy. We tried to shrug it off, but the atmosphere had shifted. The air felt heavier, colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer, darker. We huddled closer together, our flashlights pointed outward as if the beams of light could protect us from whatever might be lurking in the darkness. That's when the whispers started. At first they were so faint that I thought I was imagining them, but then they grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from all around us. They spoke in hushed tones, too low to make out the words, but there was something unmistakably menacing about them. It was as if the dead were having a conversation, and we were the topic. "Okay, this isn't funny anymore," Emily said, her voice shaking. "We should go." I agreed. The cemetery had gone from spooky to downright terrifying, and I wanted nothing more than to leave. But as we started to pack up our things, something stopped us. A figure emerged from the fog, just beyond the reach of our flashlights. It was tall, with broad shoulders and a face obscured by shadows. It stood there, perfectly still, watching us. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the trees. But it wasn't. The figure took a step forward, and we all froze. Its movements were slow, deliberate, almost like it was testing us, seeing how we would react. And then, without warning, it vanished, swallowed by the fog as if it had never been there at all. For a moment, none of us moved. We were too stunned, too terrified to do anything but stare at the spot where the figure had been. And then, as if someone had flipped a switch, we all bolted for the gate. We didn't stop running until we were back in town, gasping for breath and drenched in sweat despite the cold. None of us spoke, the fear still too raw, too real. It wasn't until we were safe in my living room, huddled under blankets, that someone finally broke the silence. What was that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. No one had an answer. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just some prankster, or a trick of the light. But deep down we all knew the truth. There was something in that cemetery, something beyond our understanding. And whatever it was, it had seen us. I never went back to that cemetery, and neither did my friends. We never talked about that night again, as if by staying silent we could pretend it never happened. but I can't forget.